I got into a stage of, and using me as representing an aspect of the collective, of having that spiritual awakening and seeing through the illusion, seeing through whatever is happening in the world. But that's still like a stage of being awareness. And then it's more like coming back into being the person with that new perspective, that higher consciousness or understanding. And with that, then how can I navigate into these relative realms in a way that can be of service, not only to me, but for everyone?
Right. Yeah. It's sort of like that old Zen koan that we hear a lot. It says first there is a mountain, then there's no mountain, and then there is a mountain. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's so much truth to that koan, because if we are at a place where we are still reacting to life and judging what's going on with anger or resentment or unforgiveness, then yes, that is a place where we probably shouldn't engage with the world, right?
Yeah.
We're not coming from a place that's going to have any power or influence to it. We're just going to contribute to more of that insanity. Mm-hmm. So it's like, heal my perception first. Absolutely. But the highest level of freedom is not where we sit in a cave and ignore the problems of the world, right? We engage with the suffering of the world from a place of liberation, where we're raising the world up to our level, not, pointing the finger down at the world as if, we're spiritually superior to what's going on in the world or something like that. If someone's at that place, I would say for sure, don't try to create change when you're still unhealed yourself. But this is what the universe, I think, is really offering to all of us, is like, we don't have the luxury anymore of ignoring all the forms of unconscious enslavement in our world that plague not only the world around us, but us. Most of us in America are waking up, myself included, to all of these unconscious forms of slavery we've been under. And it's like, the way you are with one thing is the way you are with anything. Mm-hmm. When you stop lying to yourself, then you start recognizing when other people are lying to you, when your government's lying to you, when world leaders are lying to you. And if you've truly healed the liar in yourself, then you won't have any judgment towards them, because you used to be there too, right? But you will see it. And that's an aspect of wisdom, that discernment. It's like, don't think you'll ever pull a fast one over on a sage or a realized being, right? They're extremely sharp, but they're coming from a place of love. They have nothing to prove, but the wisdom is still there. So it's like, enlightenment isn't this state of obliviousness or ignorance to what's going on around you. It's very much the opposite. Your discernment will become much sharper, and you can act from a place that is connected to that divine power, right?
I love that. There's a lot of power in that, a lot of fearlessness, and it makes me think about the service to self and service to others, and mostly because in that state of oblivion that I've been into that stage, it was more like I will give love endlessly to everyone, and I was unbalanced in that service to others, and I'm still balancing both. But it's there, like the completeness of that would be, how do I know when to be in that aspect of love and when to be in that aspect of discernment and being sharp and knowing when to say something, not to say something, when to act, and how would that influence the reality I want to see?
Yeah. Well, excellent question. And I think that truly the two, love and wisdom, go hand in hand, because if love wants to serve, if love wants to help, which is all that love wants, right, is to love, then it needs wisdom to do that at the most effective level, because just the desire alone to help or to serve or to heal isn't enough if there's no wisdom behind it. Because as we know, if we're naive to the sort of the tactics and strategies the negative path uses for mind control and manipulation and unconscious slavery, if we don't understand the mechanisms at play, then the negative path can easily usurp our acts of service for their own purposes. So it reminds me a bit of the Bible verse that says, "You must be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves." Meaning you're still pure, you're still shining with that purity, that innocence, but you're very wise. You understand the games that are being played. You understand the metaphysics of reality, so that if there is a service to self-influence over somebody, you know what it is, you know how to heal it, how to address it, and how to meet it. And if you don't have wisdom, you can't do any of that stuff, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of what one of my favorite self-realization teachers, David R. Hawkins. I don't know if you have heard about him, but I really resonate with his path. And he says that whenever beings, service to self beings, see that vulnerability, that innocence, that naivety, you know how to
Yeah. Naivete. Yeah.
naivete, then they see like they can get energy from that. And that's
Yes,
and
absolutely.
in my case, like got so much like drained because it's like, oh, I see you with love and life, blah, etc. But it's not just always like that. So it's more like, okay, I see you with love because I understand that in the purity of your being, you're just oneness. But in this realm, and Hawkins also mentions that there are different types of purgatory realms, like heavens, like
Right.
hells, and then I need to be in that center of love and wisdom, masculine and feminine.
Right. Yeah. I think to see the negative polarity for what it is, to have that discernment and recognize it, is in a sense honoring it for what it is. In the idea that the creator made this play, set up this play the way it is on purpose, with a positive polarity and a negative polarity, and both are supposed to play their roles to the highest so that God can have that experience of itself. It needs the contrast, it needs the darkness and the light. So it's like when I see service to self-influence, like it's their job to do what they're doing. I can't judge the negative path for that. It's actually doing perfectly what God intended it to do in that sense. But likewise, I am a being of light on the positive polarity. So it is my job to meet the darkness with light and to bring healing and service to others, to the world. So it's like to actually engage with the game in the way it was meant to be played, to me, is actually the highest state of consciousness you can have about it.
That's so beautiful. Yes. And something else I want to touch on, you mentioned something about Ramana Maharshi in one of your videos, like how in his state of consciousness, he was sometimes take on the pain of his students and of the world and develop illnesses. And like that's in the higher level. But for me, in cases of personal relationships, sometimes I find myself feeling all the subtler energies. And I'm like, where's the line of some of that energy is part of me, or it's just I'm feeling the density and the suffering of the world?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting to talk about the way that Ramana Maharshi, the way that he passed on through this incarnation was essentially because he couldn't stop himself from absorbing the karma and vasanas of the disciples that sat before him. And they would implore him to please stop absorbing their karma because he was getting so sick and ill and he had to walk with a cane. And he would basically, his response was, it's not a choice. It's the self within me, the love of the self in me can't help but do that. It's just, it's nature to love and to heal and to absorb that suffering and that karma. And Ramana clearly had no distinction between self and other, even to the point that one of the stories you're referring to, David Godman said that sometimes people, if they were like striking a tree or trying to cut a tree branch off around him, he would sense the tree's suffering and it would cause him pain. And he would say, stop hitting that tree. And they didn't realize, like, wow, that's how connected his being was to everything. And so it makes me wonder, like, is that a limitation of a third density body, maybe? Or was there a stage of awareness Ramana himself hadn't seen yet where it's possible to feel and see the karmas of all these devotees without absorbing them? Like, I can't imagine Ra, a sixth density being, having that problem. It seems like one of those imbalances of love and wisdom, maybe, but not to say that it's wrong. Like, it's incredibly beautiful and pure in its own right. There's nothing invalid about it. Even Ra says that about Christ's sacrifice on the cross, saying, martyrdom in fourth density love is not the highest form of wisdom. It really isn't. Fifth density wisdom would say that it's foolishness to give your life for a cause like that, because you can do so much more service by being alive, right? But at the same time, that's not to invalidate the fourth density propensity for martyrdom, because it is that incredibly pure expression of love. Like this is what love itself is. It's just, it thinks no thought of itself. It's radically forgiving and unconditional, even to the point of martyrdom. And there's something beautiful about that. So I do wonder if there was an aspect of Ramana that he just didn't know how to not do it, but it was possible. But it's interesting to see those things happen, in really realized masters on the level of Ramana and Nisargadatta. Nisargadatta smoked cigarettes all through his life until he died. And some people say, well, shouldn't that be like a blind spot or something? And again, it's like, you can't judge a jnani from our level of understanding. Looking up at, we can't understand what that state of consciousness is like. And I think for somebody like Nisargadatta, who clearly wasn't attached to his body at all, it was a physical addiction, a habit he had just picked up well before he was self-realized, and just didn't see a reason to drop it after realization. And typical, spiritual ego would say that that's some kind of lack of wisdom. But is it? How can we really know?
Yeah, for sure. I've thought about that. And the more and more I feel not identified with my body and more with the field of whatever comes up, I'm like, it's just a sensation. So if I smoke a cigarette and I have a drink, or I had a phase where I was vegan and I'm like, I can eat anything. And I think like many people go through those stages. So in that case, it's like, if I'm not the body and I'm not judging the experience, then I'm free from it.
Right. Yeah. From his perspective, I'd imagine it was, the body has this addiction. It has nothing to do with me. Like, that's kind of how he would talk to people who would ask him. It's like, it's pretty badass.
Yeah, it is for sure. And I'm like, is that just like going all through the wisdom? So we want.
Yeah, I think so. I think that maybe is the, overbalanced of wisdom, where it's like, now you're, there's some aspect of compassion for the body maybe was, I don't want to say lacking in Nisargadatta's consciousness, but it's like, you can't use these value judgments, right? Because it's all valid. Like, God wants to experience also an overbalance of wisdom, or in Ramana's case, an overbalance of love. Like, that's an absolutely perfect experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And what Ramana mentioned, you mentioned about Ramana on taking others' pain, just to go back onto that a bit. Maybe it's more efficient if I know that I'm going to feel the pain of a family member, for example. And maybe if I'm fully intuitive with my higher self in that moment, and it becomes me, and then the person completely dissolves. Because if I'm thinking like, am I going to take the person's pain? I'm still creating separation. I can see that like trick. So if I'm in complete flow with my higher self and with what is complete state of enlightenment, then I would be just intuitive and like, okay, I don't have to be here. And I know which role I have to play for the collective, and I have to do this. And it's just some energy that flows through me. So then the situations wouldn't keep popping up into the field. Yeah.
Yeah. I go back to the opening conversation about how people are responding. A lot of people in the spiritual community are responding to what's happening in the world by getting upset at other people who are speaking out about it, saying, hey, you're making it real, but by speaking about it. And it's like, well, isn't that a great projection on your part? Like, how do you know they're making it real? Like, maybe they're feeling great compassion for all of these, service to self beings who are perpetuating this corruption. Maybe there's great love and no judgment or feeling of wrongness at all. Maybe that's the place they're coming from. How can you possibly know, right? So it's indicative to me that there's something in me that wants to bypass this experience, and it's coming out in this form of judging others for speaking out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Of course, in my own process, like every time I'm just judging someone or something, is because I haven't accepted that aspect of myself.
Right.
Or like, because I want to have the courage, I want to embody that aspect. I want to be able to speak up and do this, do that. So every person, I see that as an act of courage, and that person is just showing me what I'm capable of doing. And it's also a great service for the people that judge that, or judge stepping up towards the corruption of the world, because then
absolutely,
like being a mirror to show the blind spots and where they can heal more or balance more or release those judgments to be more free, and then drop the conditioning, and they didn't kind of be manipulated, and then they just can make their own decisions, and then we see a change.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great way to see where we're still not maybe understanding the teaching yet. Whenever we're using non-duality to excuse or dismiss suffering in the world, that's how you know we haven't seen the teaching to its highest understanding yet, because that's not what non-duality would have us do. It's changing our perception of the world and helping us to engage with the world from the highest perspective, a non-dual perspective. So I think that it's certainly been a great catalyst for me as well as a teacher, because a lot of people will say things to me like, Aaron, I feel like by speaking out against corruption, you're contradicting your own teachings of non-doership. Mm-hmm. If you're not the doer, then shouldn't you just sit down and shut up? And I'm like, hey, that's a great question, because it's showing that you're really trying to work out what this non-doership thing means. But the teaching of non-doership, the way the ego will always hear it is, oh man, I used to be the doer, but now I'm being told that I'm no longer the doer. So let me just go sit down and do nothing.
Yeah. The bypass.
It's like, no. Yeah, exactly. The teaching is you were never the doer. So all those things you did in the past, all the past actions happened automatically. That's the teaching. So it's like non-doership means I didn't put this passion in my heart to speak truth to injustice, to help heal the world of corruption and suffering. I don't know why this passion's in my heart. I didn't put it there. I'm not the doer. I'm just following it. Like, who am I to get in the way of what source has placed within me? It feels wrong for me not to speak out against what I'm seeing in the world. Mm-hmm. And of course, speaking out from a place of inner peace. I'm never moved from my peace. And if I am moved from my peace, I keep quiet. I keep it to myself. I don't want to ever speak from a place of resentment or bitterness or anger, because then I am adding that state of consciousness to the world. I am increasing that vibration. But man, the whole reason we find inner peace is so that we can heal the world from a place of power and influence. Mm-hmm. So if I am walking down the street and I see burning buildings, is that a judgment or a discernment? The building is on fire. I don't need any judgment to see that. In fact, you could say if I'm judging the burning building, I'm really not seeing it yet. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we judge what we don't understand. If we see it completely and we understand, then there's just no judgment, just complete intelligence to know how to act or not act, or take action or not take action, or say something or keep quiet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the fact that the perfection of reality is so impossible for the mind to grasp that it doesn't. Typically, people newer to these teachings have a hard time understanding that it's all equally valid. Like, the quote unquote evil is valid in that sense. And then our response to it is just as valid. Like, to say that any of it's wrong or shouldn't be happening is an indication that you're actually not seeing reality as it is. It's perfect that there's corruption and that we have passion in our heart to speak truth to it. Like, this is a catalyst source has created for itself. So it's like, let me not be so arrogant as to get in the way of that catalyst and cut it off and say, oh, well, I do want to speak out, against child trafficking and drug manipulation and central bank systems and all these things. But I have these non-dual concepts that say the world's an illusion. So I guess I'll just keep quiet. Like, that's ego, not source.
Yeah. Ego bypassing and using that teaching to stay small and be in your full potential.
Bingo. Well said.